Hey there.
Hello. How are things?
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah. It just occurred to me what you have behind you.
Yeah, that's what I got behind me, man. That's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
I'm looking
Actually,
down.
it is about time for a beer, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, if this was not a pandemic, I would have already been drinking at lunch today. So that's how we celebrate. So
yeah.
Good to know.
So I got a quick question for you.
Let's go ahead and start you off. Go ahead.
So I was doing the xAPI storyline, and Joan helped me with that. But one thing I noticed was like when you're like going to the console and you want a console login, you know, to get your name or whatever you want to do. Like when I was on Google or even Edge or whatever, I would go in and I'd go to the console and I just would like, you know, put a login and nothing would appear, like my name or nothing would appear. Like if I did 2 + 2, 4 would appear, but I'm just getting everything undefined. And I don't understand why.
Do you want to open up a page?
I could show you. Yeah, I could give you a quick show here.
I don't know if Andrew and I are the best ones to jump in on that, but we'll see.
It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand. Can you have to disable me or something?
Oh, to share? Sorry, I didn't realize that's what you're just open the page.
Right.
Advanced, all. See what that does for you?
All right. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, Zoom meeting.
Yeah. So now I'm going here and I got to inspect right. I'm going over here. And when I go console, you know, dot log, and if I go like Brian, nothing. I don't get it for anything. I don't get it for get variable. I get undefined for everything, except like if I go 2 + 2. It'll give me 4. That works.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. I tried it on like, you know, Bing, Edge. I thought maybe it's the browser, but it's not working on any of them. And I don't know. That's going to be a problem. I think that's a problem. I can't understand why it's not working. I don't know if there's something blocking it or something. But nothing works.
Is there a space between the period? And the log?
It does look like there is.
If there's a space between.
It needs to be.
I could do it again. I mean,
actually, use your up arrow. Type in an up arrow. Should give you 2 + 2. Type in an up arrow again.
Yeah, go take that space out from between the period and the L.
Use your left arrow and go back to the space. You should be able to delete
here.
It. Hit enter.
Yep, run that
right now.
Yep.
Same thing. So how can he see the log? Is my question.
That worked for me.
Ah.
Let's see.
I think it's under those 2 dashed or 2 greater than signs next to network. Up above, you see console is underlined. Then you have sources, then network.
Yeah.
Look at the 2 arrows that are next to network. Click on that and see if there's a log. I don't see the log screen.
Oh, yeah. There should be a...
Maybe
can you pop that window out? It looks like towards the far left, there's an icon to... the one below that.
Oh, here. Here?
That hides it. I was looking for something that would...
Make it larger?
Yeah, because mine's showing... What are you in, Chrome? Yeah, I'm in Firefox. Let me see if I can
Yeah, we've all
reproduce
got
that in
different
Chrome.
browser. That doesn't help.
All right, so inspect console.
It's like Peter's coming in.
Yeah, that is displaying for me. What
Yeah.
is different in my interface? I think what you're looking for is displaying at least. It's not giving me. It is giving me undefined, but after it gives me undefined, or sorry, before it's giving me undefined, it is logging back whatever is in quotes.
Doesn't do it for anything. Get variables, nothing. Everything that I put in, it's undefined. Except, like, obviously, if I put in an arithmetic or something like that, it works. But any variable, it's not working. I thought maybe it was Chrome, but I tried it on Bing. I tried it on a few others, and it's doing the same thing. So I don't know why.
When you start to type in console.l, does it try to auto suggest log or give you a function
Does
list?
auto suggest if I go console, like it'll have it right here. You see?
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter who I put in there. Even if I put in something like that, it's still.
Yeah, I'm in.
There's
a
got to be
third
something
browser,
with the settings.
and
I
I'm
would
getting
think
an error
there's
saying uncaught reference console is not defined. I wonder if it's because the page you're on,
page, maybe.
the Google page, doesn't have console
I try a different page.
commands or defined as a variable, or
That's not even a page, it looks
I
like.
know.
It's showing Google, but like when I tried it, I just opened up the browser and it's the same thing. It's showing me a kind of a search screen, but
Yeah.
if I inspect element, there's nothing there. And my console is logging out. And just quotes and anything, and then close quote and close parenthesis.
It should show up.
There's something setting it. I don't know what's going on. Sources? Would sources be anything? I don't know. I'm pretty new to
Sources
this.
is a whole other tab. It should be under console. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? That we could probably do it in LiveCode itself or somewhere else.
I just wanted to do the basics. I just wanted the name to appear. I just wanted it to do what it's supposed to do. I thought.
I'm not familiar enough with console to.
I don't know if
really
it matters.
How it goes.
I don't know if it matters when it comes to LiveCode or anything else that I'm doing later. I thought, I don't know if it's going to matter. Would it matter?
I don't think so.
I mean, I don't know much, but it's just kind of weird.
Typically, they use console as a command when you're troubleshooting the browser, but you can use it within JavaScript. And then when you run the JavaScript in the browser, it will let you view what you've logged within that browser. So in LiveCode, we're using a widget as a browser.
Okay.
And as far as I know, there's not really any way to look at this kind of developer screen in that widget within LiveCode.
Right. I used it like when I was going through Storyline because I was putting xAPI in Storyline.
Right.
And so when I ran it through there, I opened the console in Storyline to see if there were any errors because I was having a problem. Because Now, hopefully it works. And I mean, it worked in storyline, so it didn't show anything. I don't know. I just thought it was really strange. It's kind of frustrating, man. You know, not to be able to get it.
Why I understand. It's part of it. The challenge is not having.
Just like, man. Now I might try it on somebody else's computer. Like I got a couple ones, and just try it on them and see if it's the computer.
Try going to a web page, because like Andrew said, this isn't truly a page. It's presented as one, but I think it's default within.
Well, here's Rosette. Let me go to Veracity.
Even there.
Let me see.
And then
I just right click
Open
here.
Up your console, your developer tools.
Let's see. I'll go here. Doesn't do it in there either.
Yeah. So hello, Joan. Hello, Peter. We just sort of dove in again with Kevin and Andrew, and we're troubleshooting a little bit with some of the JavaScript we're trying to work on. So
Joan was with me on this.
Oh, okay, good.
She's the one who pointed me out to the console on the storyline, so she knows that it's not, for whatever reason, it's not working.
Is storyline again?
No, not storyline. Well, it was weird with storyline. I should have checked the console on storyline, because I don't know why it didn't work after you left, and then I just copied the script from the other storyline and pasted it in, and it worked. So I must have had something off slightly on the other script, because when I pasted in the one that you did with me, it worked. But I was just showing them why I can't get the console to do any login or anything on any of the sites.
It's still not working? That's odd.
That is odd. Huh. I don't know. Nobody here seems to understand it either. It's just strange.
It is.
I don't know. Maybe. Microsoft wouldn't have anything to do with blocking it or anything like that, would they? Like, never mind.
I don't know. I'm up for a good conspiracy theory.
I
don't know if it's really going to get us anywhere, but
yeah, I know. So.
That's
all right. I'll stop sharing there.
That's all right. I'm doing some work behind the scenes on the server, so the time is not completely lost. These are actually, what I'm doing is uploading Joan's sample files. And
my sample files?
They are uploaded.
I have sample files?
I don't know. Maybe I misattributed. Joan, didn't you put files up in the Slack?
Unless maybe it was Helen.
It was Helen. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay.
I apologize.
Yeah, I think she'd be there around 4.
Yeah. And I think Martin's going to join at 4:30, if not 4. So in the meantime, we're just sort of working through some of the background stuff. We can pull up the agenda if we want. But like I said, I'm trying to... There we are. My apologies, Joan. It was Helen's files. And I'm just realizing I'm not sharing yet. So you couldn't see what I was talking about anyhow. So here's the entry. I've got the policy sample, compliance learning, use case. And if I can pull off another window. This is the back end of one of the file servers. So when I talk about duckworks.biz, I'm showing you public HTML is where everything is stored. And then down into this path, I have, this is effectively duckworks.biz into xAPI into LiveCode, which is our current project. And then I've set up a couple URLs, one for visual, one for query. And like I said, these files that I'm pointing at in the Slack here, use case, compliance learning, and policy sample, are now up there on the server. So in theory, you can go new, type in one of the Duckworks URLs, CPI makey LiveCode, there we go. Just give that a minute to resolve here. Okay, so there's one of our pages, and then the idea is if I open up another new tab, I should be able to generate a URL, and instead of going into query, I want to go into files. I shouldn't say slash, I should say. I'm going to pull the file manager off and see what my file names are here. Let's just do the PDF for now. Hopefully I get a view instead of a download. Not the fastest thing in the world, but it did work. And I have my note-taking app on a different screen, so I'm going to copy that into there. And unfortunately, this is landing right on top of the controls for Zoom. And the other one we wanted to look at is MP4. Space? No, there's not a space. Okay.
Congratulations on your new role with our company. Our company.
So we had a little bit of a chirp while it's buffering, which is fine. I'm going to pause it. But the idea is we now have a URL that's resolving out to the server, and we have these files hosted where I can get access to them. So let me just come up to the surface again and show you my notes for today. For the agenda, I want to talk a bit about projects that are updates for projects that are underway and next steps. Open items last week or new items. I want to talk some more about part 2 projects, maybe elaborate on the video and the PDF. And frankly, that's sort of what I'm doing here. And then we need to talk about an intro to LiveCode session, and I wanted to see if Martin and maybe Andrew and David could join us on that. And then goals, if we need to revisit them, are always on the agenda, so I put them back there. I'm not sure you can view that, but these are the 2 URLs I just copied and pasted from here. So it's the same URL. The idea is in the Notes app on the Mac, I can have this open on different machines. And what that allows me to do is go to my development machine and open the same file and then paste that into LiveCode. So in terms of an app update for the one I'm working on, let me just open that screen and see if it wakes up here. Looks like I might have done that. Good. Okay. So I'm dragging another screen over, which is physically another computer next to me, but this is a way I can share it with a group without pointing over there and saying it's that one. So again, here I have Notes app open on that computer, and the URLs have already copied over. So if I come, let's see, there are a couple things in the way here. So this is the updated app. After a consult with Martin and some changes that were suggested, I built a few different improvements. One of them is, and one of them is that I'm going to pages that I know are constructed with JSON and the JavaScript I need. So I can test that just by sending a character, and it's going to tell me that I've received that character and respond that the LRS has given me an ID, so I know that page is working. So that is our visual feedback. Since this visual page has the viewer for the JSON, I can now tunnel into that. I think I've shown you that before, so I won't belabor it. This page, or each of these links across the top are different pages I'm looking at. This page has the ability for us to just click a button and send a statement. Same kind of feedback. It's using a JavaScript message to create an alert within LiveCode to tell us that we've sent that statement. This one has no feedback, so all I'm doing is confirming that I've sent the statement, but I can then come over to the query and look at what was just sent. Got one more here that I can type in my name, type in a bogus email address, and then send a statement based on this information with this as the identifier. So it's telling me that the started statement has been sent, and I can send a sequence this way. It's telling me now an interacted statement has been sent, a selected statement will be sent, and then a completed statement will be sent. So that's the third page, and then the fourth is actually the query that I was alluding to. I think I've shown a little bit about this one before. I click pull data, and it takes a moment to refresh and pull that data in. And this information is actually sorted in order of these summaries. In order to get the summary, it has to tell me how many are started, how many are interacted, how many are completed, and how many have been selected. So based on those statement types, I can scroll down and see that there are interacted statements here, started statements. And what I'm realizing is my JavaScript inside this page may be limiting the responses because I don't see the name and email I just sent. So I may have hard-coded this just to pull out responses from the makey data, and the previous page I linked on is not using that.
So Brian,
Go ahead, ask the question.
You're doing this this is all in LiveCode.
This is in
right?
LiveCode.
And you're doing the requests, the HTTP requests using JavaScript, or are you using LiveCode, or both?
It's sort of both.
Okay.
So LiveCode is acting as the host of the data and sending JavaScript to the page you're seeing viewed in the JavaScript browser, which then gets sent as a query to the LRS.
Okay.
If that makes
sense. And doing it this way allows... But the reason I ask is because I finally figured out how to send what to use what Andrew did with the post keyword, I guess, a function in LiveCode.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess my question is: it better to use JavaScript to
I think it's going to vary
send?
depending on what type of statement you're trying to send.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the more complicated ones, it will begin to get a little bit more challenging to do it outside of LiveCode. I think LiveCode, it makes you gives you the ability to compound a lot of statements and like headers and authentication and that sort of thing that I think will make it a little bit easier. But this is it's doing something similar. I mean, this is just giving us a visual representation of that. So it's still kind of the same data that's getting sent to a server. It's just whether we're getting kind of raw data back or we're getting some kind of fancy visuals with it.
Right.
I see.
Speaking of visuals, Brian, I think your data might be there. I think it's just sorted bad. Because I think it might be sorted by single digit instead of multi, because it looked like it was repeating, but it's not. There's actually several different dates in there. It's more than just 10 of them. Yeah. So I think you might just have a weird sort pattern.
That is entirely possible. I think I ran into that before.
I see March 17th today up there. You just scrolled past it. So so maybe it did go in if you did one today.
So what I see, and you're sort of seeing that with the numbers, this is the end of the completed. Item 1 is the beginning of the selected. So if I pay, look down a little bit, the selected ones are then a long series. So I don't know if I can actually find in there. Let's try it. It doesn't actually show the email, does it? Yeah, it's not finding it. The other challenge is the way I have this set up. We have a single browser widget on a single card. So if I navigate back and forth between these, we're losing the data that we have on the screen. So if I click type data again, I can't see what I had entered earlier. And now if I go back to the query has sort of been flushed from memory. So one of the things I'm learning in this architecture is by using a single browser widget on a single card, I'm not, in a sense, caching that information, because all this tab thing is doing is jumping between the files, or I should say the URL that is identified with the browser, and that's what this command here that I typed in is doing. Is it's alternating between a series of these and resetting the browser widget to a new URL, which erases the information that had been saved in the browser before.
Are you on one card or are you hopping cards here?
No, I'm on one card with one browser widget, and each of these, in effect, buttons or tabs up here is changing the URL of the browser widget each time. So I think
why not just have 5 browser widgets?
This is just the way I set it up initially, but what I'm learning is I probably need to do that if I want to be able to, maintain that state, maintain that data. So let me go ahead and hit enter on this, and it'll show us that PDF. This is that file that I was showing you in the background that I uploaded to the server that Helen had given us as a sample file. So part of what Andrew demoed was we can set the URL of a browser widget to a PDF. Sorry, someone is calling. I'm also getting a message that we're down to 10 minutes on this Zoom. And my mouse is submarining, so I can't click to dismiss that, unfortunately. If I just hit enter, I'm going to get there it went. Okay, good. So the idea is I could use this, since we've tested it, I'm going to copy it out of there. I could go out of browse mode, drag a button onto the screen, and double click it to get the properties of the button. So I've renamed it just to PDF. And since I have it selected here, I can go up to the object menu and look at object script. And I want to create a mouse up handler for when it's clicked on. So on mouse. And then that gives me the list like we were looking at earlier. Just go ahead and complete it with up, which adds the end mouse up, and then paste. So at this point, provided I apply or save the changes out, and now my icon's green. So clicking apply or saving will turn that icon green, showing the script has been updated. Now if I go back into browse mode, again, we're still seeing the PDF, so if I switch out of this and back to query, that PDF link is no longer part of the browser widget, but I now have a button that will set it as the browser widget. It looks like the other thing I need to do is set the scroll. For some reason it's scrolling down a little bit. I might have the scroll set in one of these other views, which would, which transferring the URL into the widget isn't telling it to reset the scroll. So I need to add that code into our button here. But this allows us to pull up the PDF. And the other thing I'm thinking of doing to this is pulling another button out and creating a way to view the, oops, I didn't change, another way to view the video object like we were talking about earlier, but I need to actually build another card for that and build the navigation so it's jumping to that card, and then these other buttons will need to jump back to this card. Any thoughts on that as a navigation approach? I'm looking at my wrong menu while I'm doing that.
I really like what you got set up. Something personally that I've been discovering with LiveCode and projects recently is that I'm finding that less cards is sort of an easier solution for me to maintain. Putting just sort of more stuff on a card and just doing hiding and showing to, like with the browser, like you were saying, being able to maintain that state. For my personal experience recently, it's been working on mobile projects and doing a lot of resizing on mobile screens. And so I found, or even worse, going back and retrofitting some older projects to be resized. And so what I found is that it's a pain in the butt to have to do that on every single card and just really maintain so many sets of scripts, because I didn't think I had to do more stuff in stack scripts, and so it was on a lot of card scripts. There was a lot of duplicity to the work. So the approach I've been taking recently is, if I can throw 5 different groups on one card and just hide them and show them,
Yep.
I can still do lock screen for visual effects to make stuff, move in and out and sort of animate and look cool. But I also don't have to do as much prep work or initialization work, like when you first go to a card or a group or something, making sure to wipe all the data out or something like that. So I'm just curious if anyone else, Peter or Brian, has feedback on that approach in LiveCode, or what your experience has been.
Andrew, I do a combination of that. If there's a consistent interface, then yes, keep it all on one card, load in, load out, on or hide show things. And so I've
what I do, so I've done where I have different sections that have very different interfaces. Then it's one stack with just a few cards, and you navigate from this card, you're going to a whole new section and a whole new interface, assuming that the stack size is the same. And that works very well to keep it simple. Yes, I agree.
And that was totally not the approach that, because I started using HyperCard in the early 90s, late 80s. I mean, very early, and the whole stack and card analogy was everything was a card. Everything was a card. This was a card, that was a card. So when I took on LiveCode, that was the paradigm that I had sort of grew up in. And similar to working with Flash and other applications, there's a lot of moving to different places. You didn't necessarily stay on the same stage the whole time. But I feel more recently that that's sort of bitten me more than it's helped me to maintain things and to sort of process through. So just wanted to kind of bounce that off someone else. Thank you.
Yeah, the project I'm working on, I work with an author who authors in LiveCode, and then so I built these two applications. One is an authoring application, which was the initial one, and then the actual runtime applications is so there's like 5 cards in the runtime. The authoring application has 5 stacks with a total probably of 4,000 to 5,000 cards, and so I extract the data from those and bring it into storage into arrays and put them and then load them into these one card, and it's very fast. The 4,000 card stack is very slow and kludgy, and so definitely is a better way to do it. But it was done that way because that, like you said, it's the hypercard method. You have every card is a container for data, a new bit of data, and kind of the new whatever it is, and another card, another card, another card, and you keep adding in cards, and it worked for HyperCard, but not for LiveCode.
Thanks, Peter. I need to jump in here. We're less than a minute, so I've posted the next Zoom meeting in the chat. Sorry to cut you off, but I needed to sort of jump in and make sure everybody gets a chance to copy that out. And then I appreciate it if you could hold your thought, and we can continue it when we come back in. But like I said, we have less than a minute, so it's going to log us out of Zoom. Once it does that, I'll go in and start the next meeting. And just to finish that thought, let's go ahead and sign out. Hey, Andrew. Hey, Kevin. Looks like you guys are back in.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mentioned Martin said he's going to be joining late. Hopefully he'll be able to do an upgrade of update on us where he's at. Joan's in the waiting room. I'm going to let her in.
So let me understand, because I'm new to this. So like Andrew, and it appears like with you too, Brian, is that you don't want a lot of cards. If you can just set up your interface a little differently. Is that right?
Well, I can give you the novice perspective. I think Andrew has more programmer's perspective.
Okay.
So, like Peter said, the metaphor getting started with HyperCard and early on with LiveCode was if you make a card for everything you're working on, then your navigation is just literally go next card or go previous card.
Think about literally a stack of index cards like you're giving a speech, and then you just, next card, next card, next card, or go back a card. That was the analogy that this was all based on.
Okay.
So if you're wanting to jump into high-end programming modes, you probably won't use many cards. Like Andrew's saying, is he's hiding and showing objects, and that's actually where I'm at this point on the app I was showing. Is it is on one card. I think you're seeing it now. It is on one card, and each of these tabs is hiding or showing something in the browser. And I started to show this. I still have the preferences back there. I haven't wired them into anything. But if I click on preferences, it's actually resetting the size of the browser. The browser's still there. It's still showing the last URL it was set to, but it's moving so it displays these fields and this graphic.
Okay.
And I'm not using that space for anything else, so clicking on one of these other buttons resizes and covers it. But the other thing I would do is if I needed to use that space for displaying something else, is I would hide each of those elements with each of these other buttons that don't display them, and then I'd be able to display things there. So, I've sort of been taking shortcuts and building in dragging in a new button. But if I wanted that stuff hidden, putting it back here would mean that the preferences either need to hide or move around. Like if I built the buttons over here, they could share the space, but I'd have to manage which one of them are displaying. So by not having it on individual cards, you take ownership of managing what is displayed where.
Okay.
By dragging and dropping, creating a new card, dragging and dropping elements onto that, you can choose to set some properties on the elements and have them display on multiple cards, which used to be a common approach.
But you mentioned about browser, making them each a different browser.
Right. So this, again, my mouse is submarining, so I lost it. There it is. This object is actually a browser widget.
Okay.
So it's an object that I've dragged on from the controller over here. I think it's this Earth icon, which allows me to drag and drop this browser. So the browser sort of has a certain level of functionality built into it as a widget, and one of those things is I can tell it what URL to load. And that's what this code in the message box is doing.
Right.
So each time I do that, it's erasing what I had done in the previous page. Like if I do a query or if I send a statement, I guess that's the other way to demo this, is if I go back to the visual page and send a statement, when I get an ID, that information is erased by going to one of these other tabs. Okay. Because it's setting that URL of the browser widget into something different, which erases any information that was on the screen before.
It's just like going into the URL of your browser and typing in a different address and hitting return. You're no longer on the page you were. So if we instead have multiple browser widgets, we can only see one at a time because how they render. We basically they will overlap. But if we have 5 or however many browser widgets, it'd be the same analogy as having like 5 tabs in your browser, and each one of those has its own life and kind of history and cache, basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
So by hiding and showing all, keeping all of them on one, that's a way to help keep all of those sort of caches separate and reuse that data.
And so you'd be reading each tab or each browser separately.
Right. But like me having the 5 tabs up here that are identified, I'm trying to drag up to there. Each of these tabs right now they're affecting the same browser. If I split that apart and put in 5 different browser widgets with 5 different browser widget names, which is critical, because in the code I'm telling it the name of the browser. In this case, it's just set to browser. But if I say, visual browser, click browser, if I set 5 of them out there and identify them by name, then I'm in the mode where each time I click on one of the tabs, I have to show the browser that I want to display. And good programming practice says I should hide all of the other ones. So I need to hide everything that's not being displayed so that only the browser that is expected is getting displayed, and that one gets the URL. And that, by hiding and showing it and not resetting the URL each time you click that, I might put that the set URL into an open card. By taking that off the button, you're not resetting that browser each time you send it a URL by clicking on one of the tabs.
Because it's separated.
Yeah, by separating them. Are people understanding this? It's sort of.
Do you think that would be better?
I'm at the point where I'm thinking I need to do that, because each time I go to a different tab, I'm realizing, well, wait a minute, I just lost. Like if I send a statement here and it gets a response from the LRS and it gives me an ID, and I want to go over to the query tab and look at what that looks like, I can't go back and forth. It's not, no longer caching that information. So switching back and forth between them means I'm losing data that I had sent. And if I don't see it in the query, I can't go back and work through this to troubleshoot and see what's wrong. Which that's part of my idea of having them on different tabs, is having them available. But part of this is a learning experience as you're programming. I'm learning what the limitations of the browser widget are. And I didn't realize that having one widget and sending it a different URL each time is also resetting it. I'm losing track of what I had.
I've been using the browser widget more in projects and learning some of the limitations. It can do a lot of cool stuff, but like I've had issues with print screen, like trying to capture what's on that and make it work and look right with everything else. It is pretty powerful for what it is, to just being able to drag and drop something and have it be a full-on, basically Chrome experience inside of your app. That's super helpful, but it does have some limitations that you seem to be able to work around with JavaScript. And unfortunately, that's my linchpin, is that I'm not very JavaScript knowledgeable.
Yeah.
But I can work around all sorts of other stuff LiveCode wise. So you can usually end up making up for it, because there's half a dozen ways to do just about everything with LiveCode.
Yeah.
So let me get out of share. That's sort of the update I wanted to give on where I'm at, but I think we sort of defined some of the next steps might be to separate out and put in different browsers. I'm not sure what that does for memory concerns or other concerns. Obviously, it multiplies.
I don't think it should be too bad, because the stuff we're doing is not going to be processor heavy anyways. I mean, it's not like a Facebook video running or something. Even just the media loading, that buffers as it's needed. I think if it would just lazy load itself as it saw fit, and probably not even load if you weren't actively playing it at some point.
Okay. So part of that,
I've got a couple projects that I've got easily 3 or 4 different browser widgets on a one card at all times, but just hiding and showing them. And it's an iPad app, but I don't ever notice any issue jumping back and forth.
Good. That's good feedback. So any other comments or questions? I'm going to jump us back to the agenda, I think. Jumped out of share, realizing I need to go back to that. There we go. I don't know, maybe I should ask, Andrew, do you have anything you want to update us on as far as what you're working on? I think it was just me and Martin that were sort of doing these baseline things, so you had showed us something you...
I've not had a chance to do anything further with xAPI this week. I've done other LiveCode stuff, and thankfully Panos fixed a big bug for me this morning that I need for production. So no, I don't have anything xAPI that I could show. I could do another basic LiveCode demo, but I don't have anything planned.
Well, let's talk through that a little bit further down. Let me ask again, are there any other open items that we need to talk through, or any new items that we need to talk through? Anybody need to bring anything up?
Was it Izzy that was like, were we thinking to use it? Didn't he want to check how often someone went to a browser? Wasn't that his thing? Do you remember? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I'm not sure.
I think that was one of the things that was mentioned. I don't know who said it, but basically for the analytics to be able to track how long somebody was interacting with an object. So, if the concern is about having the multiple browser widgets open, I think we could still accomplish that by just tracking, since we do have the segmented control to jump back and forth for our navigation. We can track how long any of those are active and associate that for timing purposes. I think one of the other things that was discussed was how long, based off of how tall a browser content was, sort of calculating or tracking how long they're at each vertical scroll point.
Just capturing as we go. Yeah, my machine's sort of scrolling. I don't know if you guys are still seeing and hearing me in real time or not. Looks like it's hidden. So the other thing that I'm thinking is, as far as this elaboration of video and PDF, Andrew just sort of mentioned some of it is trying to track the timings of the interaction with the widgets. Both of these I did in the browser widget, but the other thing to add is for the video. More typos. For the video profile, there's actually an HTML page with code for implementation of the profile. Are you guys hearing me live? Okay, no, that's good. I wasn't sure if it had paused. So I want to, instead of just playing the video through the browser, I want to see about pulling up that, or pulling that HTML page out, putting it on the server, and then having it call the video file, and seeing what gets sent back and forth, what gets trapped within JavaScript, and what can be sent back and forth to do that. So That's sort of the next step for elaboration, I'm thinking, in this project. And the idea is I also want to make some progress with the PDF. And ideally, I'd want to have that ready for next week to review, but also to post onto GitHub and let people download it and try it locally, because we had set timing for this week or next to have those projects ready, and we're sort of up against that timing so people can look at it for content. That makes sense. Any other comments on the elaboration piece? Anything else we want to ensure gets there? Okay, then the next step is to talk a bit about the introduction to LiveCode. My thinking is, and Martin's not here right now, but my thinking is we step back and rediscuss this a little bit when he gets on board. But I wanted to see if Andrew might be able to do some of the timing for delivering that, if I can do some of it, and if Martin can do some of it, so we can sort of hand it off. And, you know, in terms of timing, I was thinking after the next live session, which is tomorrow, so maybe Friday or into next week, we could set up time for that. Ideally, those of you who are, or those of us, I should include myself, who are just getting started with LiveCode would be live and be able to interact. But the idea is it would also be able to be available as a recording, and you could also type into Slack if you had questions or concerns. So I'd like to try and set a timing where we can get, you know, everybody there. Maybe we use some of the Wednesday session next week, or maybe we set up something separate. So I might, as we go through and talk through some of those options, I might see about setting up another when to meet about that. And I need to step back here. I thought I had grabbed it, but it looks like I didn't. This is the last things we had discussed. So I'm going to grab and put it down here. That's why it's not scrolling. It's off the bottom of the screen. There we go. So what we've talked about so far is interaction with the standard elements, dragging and dropping them on the screen and then making them work. I sort of showed quickly how a button would work, but the idea would be to elaborate that a little further. You want to put a handler in the button. I chose on mouse up. I want to, you know, be able to elaborate and show the different options for that, and dialogue a bit about why mouse up tends to be default. The short version of that is when you use mouse down, if somebody doesn't release their mouse right away, you're sending that statement over and over and over again. So you can actually queue up within LiveCode a dozen or so triggers of whatever code you are sending. And once you release, all of them are then queued and responding. So if you actually tied that to sending a statement, and I've done this, you can wind up sending 12 or 20 statements in the time that somebody holds the mouse button down. So it's one of the first lessons learned is mouse up tends to be a better button click item than mouse down or some of the other options. Mouse over, mouse hover. Those are sort
Mouse
of
up also gives you a chance to bail out. So if you mouse down and decide not to, you can sort of scroll off of the button and release. If you're not releasing off of the button directly, it's not a mouse up. So mouse release is a nice bail, which makes mouse up even more critical, basically, for your trigger. That's what I found. I can put my my button animations on mouse down, and then mouse release and mouse up get the same unanimation to give you that visual feedback, but give the user a chance to bail.
Good point. So I'm not sure we're going to dive into the widget browser for PDF as a business level feature, but it's in there. I'll put it in italics. We also mentioned having a callback message when a timer or keyframe is reached within the video. I think that's going to be helpful for people. It's sort of an elaborate for the video. We did talk about setting, looking at the focus or the timing of the video and the PDF, either in the browser widget or the bookmarklet item. I sort of hesitate over that one. Andrew, I think you sent this to me, but I don't have it in GitHub. So
I didn't put it in GitHub. I thought I put it in Slack, though.
Okay, so I'll double check that. Brian needs to get that into GitHub. And let's see. Like I said, the PDF is created on a hosted web page. I think there may be some code for that with JavaScript embedded that helps us track data. And I am pretty confident there's information on the video profile for the same kind of thing. For a video embedded in a web page, we can track information. So that's something else we want to look at. Wow. Typing sideways on a keyboard, it's not really helpful.
So Brian, I have a question.
Go ahead.
So these are all topics that might be in the intro to LiveCode. Is that what these are?
That's
and the intro to LiveCode is for the cohort? Or is it for us?
It's really for our team.
Oh, okay.
But we'll be publishing it out. The rest of the cohort can take it too.
I see. That's right. Okay, thank you.
But I mean, we'll be putting it in Slack. If other people want to join in, that can happen too. So my view on this is to answer our team's questions. So if you have any other thoughts about what you want to see in this, now is a good time to say, well, what about this? What about other objects, other interactives? We haven't really talked about all of the examples, but the other example that's fairly common within the UI is a map browser within LiveCode. Oh, I'm trying to figure out why I don't see LiveCode launched. It's because I'm looking at it on a different computer, and the computer's asleep. There we go. So basically, each of these icons is the default object within LiveCode. You can see a little bit of a mouse over. There's a default button and panel. And then they've done some work on getting SVGs functional within the app. You can add a spinner or some of the other functionality, but there's actually drawing tools that you can both use as a developer, but then you can also, through some tricky coding techniques, enable them for your user of your app to draw on the screen. So that's a possibility, but it's not something I'm individually experienced with. I wouldn't be able to show how to do that. But if there was something else out there that people wanted to see, that's sort of what I'm getting at. Is any of these things are sort of fair game, but I just wanted to get them on a list so we can talk through them. Peter is. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I have some questions. I tried to work. Well, I did work on using LiveCode to make the little mobile bookmarklet thing that I talked about. Well, it wouldn't even be a bookmarklet, I guess. Reporter, xAPI reporter. And I have just some general questions. I don't know if now's a good time to bring them up.
Now's a fine time to bring it up.
Okay.
I'm
The
sort
first
of
thing
at the tail end of this conversation. Do we want you to share and bring up the file so you can ask the questions directly?
Oh, well, it's just, I could, but it's more about what I need to use because it's a lot of documentation up there for LiveCode. And I got lost, and sometimes I just go out to Google and do a search. And the first thing I did was I said, okay, I want to make an Android app. So I followed the instructions for installing the Android Studio and all that kind of stuff. And then I made my little Android, what I thought was an Android UI until I tested it on the emulator, and it looked awful. And then I did some more Googling and said, oh, you have to do something with the native controls for mobile and this kind of thing. But I didn't know where to go to actually find this is what you do step by step, like I did for setting up Android. So my question for that is, are there any definitive resources for how to get started with the developing for native mobile app? That was the first thing I encountered. I said, oh, it doesn't matter. Let's move on to something else. And the next thing I moved on to was sending a statement. I said, eventually the statements have to get in the LRS.
Yeah. And
I Googled and I read about this TSNet. And I saw sample code. I put it in. And it says, oh, that's only available on the business.
Right.
I said,
it's a high end.
I said, oh. But then I remember Andrew did the demonstration, and I said, okay, I'll look at the video, but because of the video quality, I guess from Zoom, I couldn't make it out. But I said, I remember he used post or put or something, and eventually I found some code that helped me do that. So right before the meeting, I was able to post the statement to my LRS from LiveCode using LiveCode, not JavaScript. That's why I asked the question before, which would be better.
Yeah.
But it just posts it. It doesn't do like robust error handling and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Which would be nice at some point. So now I know I don't need to use TSNet, but I don't really know what the difference is between TSNet and liburl. I suppose TSNet is better because you have to pay for it.
Basically, it can do some stuff faster. One of the biggest difference that you'll experience on sort of a basic user level is TSNet allows you to do non-blocking calls. So basically, with liburl, when you do that request, that put or post or whatever you're doing, it locks everything. Like LiveCode can't really do anything else while that is processing until you get the response, which doesn't take long. I mean, generally a fraction of a second or a few seconds, at most, kind of depending on what you're dealing with. But TSNet, you can get around that. And so you can send those requests off and have LiveCode, when it's done, come back and say, hey, this is done, here's the information, while you keep doing other things. So that's probably the biggest thing that you would experience. But on the level that we'll probably be using it, it's not going to really come into play much.
Okay. Well, that answers that question. And it looks like there's something in chat. I think is that about the mobile book? Mobile development. There you go.
That's a book Colin Holgate wrote some time ago. I'm not sure how up to date it is right now for latest stuff, but it was basically getting going in mobile.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, mobile. And then the other thing I was thinking about was, okay, if I'm offline, and I basically do what Brian just showed, okay, I attempted or I experienced or whatever, select my verb, and it keeps some other information. And I'm offline, that statement has to be stored somewhere, a series of statements. So I said, oh, I'll just stick it in a database, and then at some point, I figure out you're back online, or the user clicks a button, like Martin suggested, I think. You can click a button and say, okay, now I want you to send out my statements if I have any up to LRS. I said, I just put it in the database and keep them there. And then when I'm online, just read them from the database, send them up, and then delete them. And then I said, well, do I really need to do that? Or should I just put it in a file somewhere, just append them to a file? I said, is that better? And then I stopped because I said, I'll ask people who have experience in this, which would be better to manage it. SQL.
Is better what you're looking for, or is easier what you're looking for? Because these are not the same. My personal opinion would be that the file method would be easier. And especially at the scale that you're looking to do these, I don't think a database is really necessary. It could be beneficial, especially if this gets larger and you can track more information. But just saving a file to your documents folder or something is really quick and easy, and it's very accessible. So even outside of anything else, you can double click it and look at it in Notepad or TextEdit or something and see everything. When you're dealing with a database, you got to make sure to connect to it. Even if it's a local, like a SQLite or something, you still can't just double click it and know what you're looking at. So my personal opinion for this would be just open a file and write to it and close that file. That's going to be a simple method.
Okay, I think I'll take that approach because, again, I found code for using SQLite, and there's a tutorial on it, so I did that. And as I was doing it, and I got the database and put the information in, I said, maybe I should just write it to a file. Okay. I'll take Andrew's advice and use a file. And
separated value files are very easy to deal with and very readable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. So that was it for me. Those were the questions I had. Now I can get back to work.
Good to know. I see Martin has joined us. We're down to about 7 minutes left in this session, so I posted a chat in the chat the next meeting URL.
So just a question for Joan. So did you have a UI yet made up?
She's being shy. Doesn't want to show it.
Oh, okay.
No, I never started one. I did a UI, but it wasn't for the xAPI report. It was like a button. And it was just to test that I could run it on my Android emulator.
Okay.
And then right now I have an xAPI statement in a field. I click a button, post, it sends it off to the LRS, and the results come back in an output field. So that's easy. And I have buttons to make the database. So it's not the xAPI.
That's a UI, though. Yeah. Don't downplay the work that you did.
Exactly.
I can show it to you. I'm just afraid that my computer might crash if I have Zoom going, LiveCode going.
Yeah.
But I made a UI.
Show it.
Where is it?
But so that you were able to send your xAPI statements to an LRS and that all worked? Oh, good.
So this is it. I borrowed this code from somebody to do this. And this is, I said, let's just put a statement in here.
You need to turn on sharing. We're seeing you, not the...
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about that.
So let me double check that the advanced sharing options are on. I don't think they were.
It's disabled.
Now you should be able to. We've only got 5 minutes, so
I'll make it quick.
We'll get you started. I don't want to rush you. I just mean this session's going to end. So.
Oh, okay. So that's basically what I did. So this was my little test of putting information in a database. I found this code somewhere. And then this was my today's work of, here's a statement, click this button, and it goes off into an LRS. I don't think I have the LRS up.
That's a very clean UI.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just testing. And so I haven't made one for what the xAPI reported might be. Though I like Brian's colors and everything. I might have to borrow that in buttons.
That's fine.
I got logged in. Oh, I'm already logged in. So Might just try it again. But this, see how slowly. I'm at my parents' house, and they're out in the country. We have slow internet.
Oh no.
So these are the ones. This is my test from LiveCode I did earlier today, but I can just show you what it does. I just come in here, big post, and there's no error, so nothing goes here. And then I do a refresh. It should say a few seconds ago, 5 seconds.
Okay.
That's all. Well, then it came 5 seconds ago.
That's very cool.
And so now that I can do this, then I can just build the statements with LiveCode from VLI, and then have this send it off.
Okay, so the statements you're just hard coding right now. You've just hand typed it. Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay, so now that I've seen your interface, I understand your Android questions. And basically those buttons are ugly. If you just use those, they will look like they're 25 years old. There's not a good native button option for you now. You're going to be better off skimming them, which is really easy to do, though. But yes, those are going to appear super ugly on an Android device. Some of the things like the little switch widget and some of those are native based, and they will look proper on iOS or Android. But no, those buttons are god-awful.
And the background was this odd color too. I said it's white here. Why is it like?
Nope. It's like a nope. Yeah, it's. We can look at some of that through the LiveCode demo. It's real easy to skin a lot of this stuff, but yes, natively it will be hideous. But your UI is very clean to start with, so it will be really easy to make it pretty. That's the good news.
Yeah, but most of the stuff won't be on there for the final one. I guess I have some buttons here, and that's about it. I have to work on the UI. I was just going to copy what I had seen in the bookmarklet version. Oh, we have 2 minutes left. I'll stop talking. So that's it for me. So that's what I'm doing. And so maybe next week I'll actually have a UI share.
Okay, no, that's great.
Oh, I'm curious to know where how you built the code to send the statements too.
Oh yeah, I was gonna. So I'm still here. I can come in here and click code. I'm learning my way around.
Yep.
I use. Wait. Where'd it go? What? That? Oh, I have to go back.
If
We're under a minute. Do you want to pick that up in the next?
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
If you want a minute, we're down under a minute, so go into the chat and get the next meeting URL. And Kevin's asking, what is skin? Maybe we can start with that when we come back, about skinning the buttons. So let's go ahead and transition to the next meeting. Thanks, Martin. Hi, Peter. Welcome back. Kevin, did you see Martin's response to your skinning question? Basically, it's how you add UI graphics, and you might even turn it into like a 3D appearance by adding in some graphics and shadows.
His response.
Yeah.
Oh, I typed it in. The chat's probably disappeared.
Yeah, that was the last chat, unfortunately. That's why I asked him if he saw it.
No, I didn't catch it.
Yeah. So it's basically saying is that a background, or are you sitting at the bar?
That's background. I wish it was real. I'm dreaming.
Yeah.
Maybe next year.
You're all alone, so that's allowed.
Yeah.
Right? It's just that you can't be with everyone else.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? No, it's basically you just overlay buttons, or with, use icons that look like a real Android button, or you do graphics. Like you can take like I use graphics a lot, which are just like you draw things with a square or something and give it a color and give it a depth and stuff like that. So there's different ways you do it. So you're just trying to replicate it. So it's not the real icon. It's not the real Android or iOS graphics, but you're trying to copy them. Like
Do you lay it on top, or how do you? Or you just insert it?
Ryan, can you enable screen share?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
I can do a little. Yeah, I can do a little
Here we
demo. Watch out, John.
So Joe and Andrew's just going to demo just show him how to show Kevin how to do skinning of a project to make it look like it's a real, like that there's native elements on it. But I want to hear your answer to the other question that Brian had.
Okay.
You should be able to see my screen.
Yeah.
Actually, let me. I don't need the script right now. So this is an age gate when this project. This is a mobile app, and so this is meant for 21 and older. So they have to agree before it will let you in.
That's cool.
So this is actually a couple of the things that we talked about. This is a demonstration of grouping, and so this is all one card. And so just hiding and showing stuff on the same card, but it's also the skins for the buttons. So I hit a break point over here. This is some pretty complicated data grid stuff that we won't necessarily get into today. But clicking on these will sort these out differently, and these buttons are. Let me get into the group, and so that's a giant group, and then this is an object in that group. Sorry, I'm working with two giant screens that don't like to demo well. So looking at the button itself, I've tried the icon approach, and I liked it at first. That's the sort of making the graphic like in Photoshop or that sort of thing, which is how I learned how to do this in Flash or Director or whatever else. But what I found with LiveCode is that it didn't resize well when dealing with specifically mobile. I've been doing a lot of mobile projects, and so trying to do all the graphics at the appropriate dimensions was a pain in the butt. So I've been trying to just redo them through LiveCode. So a lot of things like adding an inner glow to give like a little bit of depth, especially sometimes like on a mouse down, adding some sort of a shadow or a glow or something, and then on a mouse up, reverting that back. But also just doing real simple colors. So this has a blue highlight fill. This button is highlighted right now. It's the active one, and a background fill of orange. So that's how all of these are sort of set up. So they're not the highlighted buttons, so they're not blue. If we look at the script for the button itself, on mouse down, actually, I need to add a mouse release on this. On mouse down, I'm setting the inner glow size of me. So me is the button. I'm setting the inner glow size of me to 17. So that's adding that sort of darkness. And then on mouse up, inevitably setting that inner glow back to 0. or actually in this case, setting the other two buttons that it's not, setting those colors and inner glows to different values. So these are just hexadecimal values, color combinations. But that is the skinning of a button. And so that allows me to just take what is that default button object that you drag out of the property inspector and do stuff like there's my mouse down state. So it's changed that inner glow and some of that color. And then when I let go, it's doing all these colors. And I can skip this breakpoint so we don't have to see that every time. So that is a real basic skinning, as well as groups. Like I said, this is all on one card. If I click on an individual location, let's find somebody that's got something. So this is the same card. I just hit a group and showed another one and dissolved between them. So still the same card. And again, if I click on that, now I'm on a completely different card. So this is different data. It's taken me to a different place. If I cancel, I'm going back to the card I was just on. But again, with a transition that looks the same, or some sort of visual effect that makes you feel like you're going back and forth. But this is the same card. So regardless of wherever I'm looking at, it's just using the same card, hiding and showing groups.
So that's the same card, but when you click before, like, to that place, you went to a different, like...
This is the same card.
Right, but then when you click...
I see what you're saying. So yeah, when I clicked on an offer itself, now it's taking me to a different one. Because this is similar to what Peter was saying earlier about having, a common setup or a common layout that you're going to use. This is a completely different sort of purpose. I ditched the navigation on this. You're stuck on this particular place. So all the rest of the app, there's navigation that will pop out from the side. But I specifically, when I go to that place, I want them to be locked into committing to whatever this happens to be.
So those buttons or whatever that you have, you just
yep, these are all buttons. So yeah, here's another example of, let me go into that group and select that button. And so it has a background color. This one has a border color. So that's that little orange around it. It has an outer glow that's kind of hard to see. It also has an inner glow. So this outer glow is this, it tries to demo it for you, but it's this sort of little orangish color. And so with the script, that's where sort of all the magic happens. So on my mouse down, I'm changing the foreground color, so that color of the text. I'm also changing the size of that glow. This is the example I was talking about before, where then if I go to release, or when I go to like the mouse up, I want to undo that, whatever I just did here. So I want to change that foreground color and glow again. This way I only have to write the code once. I'm just calling this handler. But then after changing those colors back, it goes to do whatever else. Set up another group to set the visible to false, set the visible of a different one to true, and unlock the screen with visual effects. And this is where the animation comes into play. So all that's on the same card.
Are there hotspots there too, I guess, that you can use? Or are they all buttons?
So these three are buttons. This is a button that brings out an entire group. There's individual groups. These are the SVG icons, the SVG widgets that we're talking about.
Okay.
And so if you click on any of these, it registers. It's kind of hard to see, but they don't highlight at the same exact time, because one of them is telling the other one, hey, I just got clicked. You should highlight too, because these aren't, they're not big buttons that have both that icon and the text. It made it easier for me at the time of development to sort of work the things out. Again, this is a project that I'm retrofitting to make it fit the tall screen. It didn't used to. And so on larger devices, there's just these giant black bars at the top and bottom of the screen. Completely functional. It just does it look modern, and the client's ready for. So this hasn't actually been released yet. It's in test flight, but mostly on the pages, it's just a matter of shrinking this data grid. So on smaller screens, you can tell up here there's a bunch of dead space in this particular layout. But this data grid would actually only come down to about here. Actually, that's not true. I use the navigation as my base. So on a smaller device, it cuts off right about here and right about here. So it's just a matter of going through and nudging stuff around on different size screens. A browser widget shows up here on mobile. It's not set to show on desktop, but this is an actual project that I'm working on. But once we start talking about buttons and some of the groupings, this seemed like an easy one to sort of show.
Okay. Looks really good. I mean, you can't tell that it's all class. The second week you said when you set it up, you can't tell at all with the light.
And so this doesn't use any OS native UI elements. And so there's no native buttons or anything like that. I'm not technically following the Android or iOS style guides. So you don't really have to. Like, as long as your stuff doesn't look horrible, they don't really care that you follow those specific, the buttons got to be touchable and that sort of thing. So I actually use this as an upsell for clients. So yes, you could have it look completely native because, users are used to what something looks like on Android or what something looks like on iOS. Or I can sell you a product that looks the same across both platforms so that it's a unified experience. It's actually easier for me because I don't have to code stuff quite as much to look different. But it's easy for branding purposes. And, most users aren't dumb. They don't have to have a back button up here and the name of the card. They're like, it works in some interfaces, but it's not really necessary for everything else. So yeah, this is my answer to be able to go iOS and Android. But the resizing is the pain in the butt. Like I said, this ends up being a little bit smaller on some of the other devices, but this was my second real big LiveCode project and longest running. I wanted to say we've been working on it since 2016 was when we started. So they are keeping the lights on for me. Well, not exactly, but
nearly.
They pay you in kegs?
That is a benefit.
Hopefully they're keeping the kegs full.
Well, and to sort of talk about some of the things we mentioned before about user interfaces and keeping stuff all on one instead of multiple. This is set up so each of these are different cards because this was meant to be kind of a one-off project. It turned into a spin-off project that got franchised out of Indiana. There's also a Florida on tap. And so I had to redo this project, but again, bit me in the butt having all these cards where I had to go through and change Indiana to Florida and, this graphic to that graphic. If it would have been all on one card, it would have been way easier to just, do a save as and be done with it in an afternoon. So that came to bite me in the butt because it was never meant to be a franchise model. It just turned into that. So again, that was a programming lesson learned for me.
Good.
So Joe,
It looks really nice.
Yeah.
no, it does.
Yeah, it does.
It's free in app stores. Feel free to download it and play with it. It is a subscription service, so you can play with the stuff. You just can't redeem any of the offers unless you are a member. But you can look at most of the interface and that sort of stuff.
Cool. We need a Pennsylvania on tap.
There you go.
There was talk of a Tennessee. I don't think there's anyone else in the works right now, but it is a fantastic business model.
I don't know. Would Tennessee include bourbon? Or is that just Kentucky?
Oh, it got to be Tennessee too.
So, Joan, the question I didn't quite finish asking was, are you using code that Andrew showed, or did you find something else, or is it original code?
Oh, not don't do anything original. I
wanted to give you that option. I created
Google how to post.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's code that I found, but I knew what words to put in the Google search from Andrew. So okay, I'll show what I have. And I also looked at what's the dude's name? It's Devlin's code too for JavaScript.
Okay.
So basically, I just put in an endpoint, and then I took out a little. Not that it really matters, but my username and password, and then set up that this application JSON for the content type. And then I took the text out of the field that had the xAPI statement and just called it JSON data, just because I thought that was nice. And then I built the headers. So the authorization it'll be basic, and then my encoded username and password, content type, and those are the two headers that I send. And you set HTTP headers to T header, and I think this uses the lib URL library, that's URL library. And then this is the post to the endpoint, sending this data, or these data. And I put the result in the output field, and for a long time I was getting error 400 error. Is because I copied the statement from Devlin Peck's course because I was too lazy to make up my own. And he uses variables. And I was sending the variables, and I said, I need to send real information. So it had like you name instead of my name, and you email instead of my email address. And then once I did that, it worked. Now I just need to figure out how to, the result, like what do I get back? And I think I'm supposed to get back more from the posts than just the result. It seems like there's some other information out there that I can get about the status.
Sometimes result, like I think with that one, but result is often used for an error. So if result is empty, you're all good. So you often get error checkers. And I think with this one, it might say 200. So if you got a 403, your result would say 403 error or something.
Yeah,
200, it would say 200, okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then I have a question while I'm in here. In some of the code that I saw when I was trying to figure this out, they use it. What is it? I know I can look it up since I'm. It says, like they'll say, put it.
It, yeah. It's certain commands return the value in it. Sometimes they return it in result, and sometimes they return it in it. So if you say ask, choose a field, right? Or choose a folder. So you ask folder, whatever. And then when you pick it, it puts that value in it. And then you say put it into T folder.
Okay.
But it's not, I don't know if there's...
It and me are pronouns in LiveCode.
What?
It and me are pronouns in LiveCode that will vary depending on the context of what you just did or where you are. So like when I was dealing with buttons, I kept saying me, and that way I could copy and paste the code, and it would always apply rather than specifying button with the name of, whatever. When you're dealing with it usually refers to the last thing that you sort of inquired about. So like Martin was saying, asking about a folder, or if you try to get something, whatever you just told LiveCode to get, that is it. It is what it has brought back to you.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's not always consistent. Sometimes you have to just test it. Like you just say, after you do a command, where did it go? Okay, put the result into one variable, put the it into another variable, and then see what comes out. Because it's there, I'm sure, well, it seems, I think there should be a method to it, and most of the times there is, but sometimes like, why did they use the result for this? And because results often an error. Or did it work? Yep, it worked. But other times it has data. And you think, okay, that's odd. I just want to make one other comment. So some points you're using real words. Like, so for example, the last, put the result into field output. And it's unquoted output. That will work. But it's safer to put quote output. To quote those.
Oh, okay.
Those literal values. And LiveCode a while ago said any English word should be reserved, right? So the words that are reserved are like put and set and post and text, and all of those are reserved for LiveCode to use and are currently used. And then they said, to be totally safe, don't put a real word like as a variable or as a something like that. So endpoint would be one that you could say, so you've made a variable and you called it endpoint, right? Now that's, it works, but if LiveCode decided one day to create endpoint as a part of its part of its language, then any code you made would be, you'd have to go back and change all the endpoints. So there's a link I can find, but there's sort of a protocol or a practice for naming variables. So you put T for temporary, S for locals.
Okay. I was wondering what T was. I would see that a lot.
Yep. T for temporary, like Martin was saying, T for temporary, S for script local. It's just going to stay in that script that you're working on. G for global. P is a parameter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Somewhere those and they seem to be consistent.
And you don't have to use those by any stretch of the imagination, but like Martin was saying, it's sort of a best practice that a lot of LiveCode users have picked up. So it does make it way easier to look at someone's code if you're familiar with that naming convention and sort of read through. And you've got the T header, the set HTTP headers to T header, so you do have some instances of that in your code still.
Yeah, because I copied this from someplace and I copied that.
Which is the beauty of Stack Overflow and Google and everything else we use to get our jobs done on a daily basis.
Yeah, I said I just need to go to work, and then I'll let other people tell me how to clean it up. Or actually, I look it up.
But what happens is you start, like, if I look back and I read stuff I've written, I can know how many years ago I did it because of how I was writing it. Right? So you change your style over a while. I'll look up that. I think there's a Brigham Young University has LiveCode, like a full course, and so they have a lot of documents. So I think they have that little document of naming variables, like just a standard practice. Yeah.
I saw that come up a lot in my searches, the BYU course. Yeah. So I'll clean up my code and make my UI.
Oh no, just little kids.
Thank you.
Yeah, the one thing I was doing, I didn't finish it, but I'm trying to do something that creates the xAPI from, like, so you input an actor, input a whatever, and it'll create the JSON. But I'm not anywhere ready with that yet. But that was something else, but I can post it when I'm done. Oh, that's another one, arrays. If you end it with an A, it's an array, like a capital A. That's another practice.
And that was, as Joan, you've noticed, you're not familiar with this stuff when you start. And so I wasn't familiar with any of these conventions when I began. So as Martin mentioned, you see how your code progresses. I took the route of really over complicating names, just sort of because you can, and because it makes it readable. So I might even put the entire word array after my variable name. It's all one word still, but so that just at a simple glance, I can see if something's an array versus a list versus, some other things, because with like camel case and that sort of thing, with the naming, you can quickly glance at that one super long word, because that would frustrate me when looking at someone else's code, all the wonderful examples of demo code, but there'd be a variable that was called like lower T capital A, lower T capital B, and I'm like, that's awesome that you are to that level of coding that just clicks for you, but that is not helpful to me when it's not really much more effort in LiveCode to name something that has a meaningful name, outside of the immediate context that you're using, because it does open up the possibility of reusing code over and over.
Yeah.
Yeah, the one that drives me crazy, and this is from my first language, was BASIC, and so repeat with I equals 1 to 10, right? And you'd use one letter variables, but then you see that different places, and they'll put one like I, what's I, what's J, and I would rather say repeat with list, with item number or whatever, and so then, because then say put item number or put whatever 3, and so as you read it, then it makes sense, whereas I all the way through doesn't make sense to me. Like, it doesn't help.
You'll also get bit if you end up nesting one loop inside of another loop, because all of a sudden that I or that X or that lazily named variable is not what you intended it to be. So, the ability to name stuff, these really complex or as simple as you want names, can definitely be an interesting coding shift.
Yeah. Oh, Brian posted livecode.byu.edu, Brigham Young. I forget the guy's name right at the moment, but
Devin?
Devin Asray?
Oh, right.
Asay? A-S-A-Y? Ooh, that's not going to work very well.
No, but it's heartening to see it work so well to send the LiveCode post, and then it just, the post command, and it just takes it by the LRS, so that makes it very easy to test our stuff out and that.
Well, I think that might be why I frustrated David, because I assumed there would be a lot more to it, especially with dealing with sending the JSON, sending the headers, and then getting the responses back. I know the JavaScript library, the xAPI widget is the one I'm thinking of, handles all that, and it's actually the one that enables my page to update and show the ID after it's been received back from the LRS. And when I was talking to David Brule earlier on, he was saying he wanted to code this directly in LiveCode, and I, frankly didn't know that the post and the get would be that easy to do. So I presumed it would be a lot more detailed than that. And that's part of why I asked Joan and Andrew to show what they're doing, because I haven't seen examples. I hadn't seen examples of sending the post and that directly from LiveCode, so I hadn't looked at it.
Yeah, I remember it looked pretty easy when Andrew did it. It was like a line, so that's it.
Yeah.
And with the TS net, it was, I saw
the examples that I showed didn't go as in depth as the ones that you did, though, Joe. The ones that I did were very basic, where I think one of them might have had a header, but most of them didn't even include custom HTTP headers. It was merely appending an API key to the end of the URL, and that was how I authenticated. So yours actually were more complicated than most of those that I demoed that day, because you had to actually specify the application type for JSON, and you specified a header different than just the default one. So you took it a notch above.
Yeah, base 64 encoded it. Yeah. No, and that's what.
that from Devlin Peck's class.
Mm.
Thanks to Kevin, because I was helping him this morning, and I said, "Oh yeah, he did it this particular way." So.
Yeah. No, this is, for me, it's just always a mystery. How do these things work? How do you get a web page? How do you? And so you just sort of play around and then poke through it. It's like, is that all? Did you just post something and it comes back, or you post? You know, so it's sometimes I find I overcomplicate things, or I scare myself and don't realize if you just push ahead, it's like, huh. Now, other things are extremely complex, and you can bang your head against the wall for months trying to do. But some of the basic sort of piping of the internet is like, it's just post and get and those kind of things.
So on this BYU site, they actually have a section on web services. It looks like the embedded URLs aren't coming across, but I posted livecode/byu.edu indexgeneric.php, and if you go to that and scroll down to web services, you'll find what I'm talking about. But there's a get method page and a post method page. Those I can post URLs for. And those might be things to look at if you want to elaborate or run into trouble. But Joan, don't overcomplicate it. You got it working.
And so in your thing, you also had get from the LRS?
Oh no, just I didn't implement that.
Okay.
That was in case I couldn't get the post working. I said, okay, we'll try get, but I didn't.
Oh, I see. So it's not like, because that's the other thing they were showing was, I think in one of the demos, how you query the LRS. So you say, how many times did, Martin take this course, or how many times, what was the frequency of that? So that's probably might be a little bit more complex, because you have to, I don't know what it is, whether it's a query that you do, or you have to construct like a, what do you call it? A REST statement with the different things, and then you get that, and then you have to organize that somehow, like display it. So that may be more difficult.
That is more difficult.
Yeah, but yeah. But it would. That's what I thought. When you had get, you would just get back something. But does it? Oh, that's what I was going to ask. Someone had mentioned getting the ID back. Brian, I think, had mentioned getting the ID of the statement that you sent. So does that get returned from when you post it, or?
I don't know. I think. Yeah, that was a question I had. I know when you post a message, or whatever it's called, query, is it to an API?
Or, yeah.
Even on success, sometimes it returns some data.
Yeah, okay.
And it could return the ID, but then if that's not in the result, I don't know how I get it back from live.
I think that was back what Martin was saying, the difference between it and results.
Yes.
So just in LiveCode, rather than say put the result, try put it into whatever variable. And then the next line, you can still say put the result as, but sort of take a look at that. I think that's going to be your key.
Well, one other sort of tip or trick is sometimes I don't want to bother creating variables. So you just put, if you just say put it goes into the message box, which is the little where you can type lines of code to send to LiveCode, but you can also get things back. So if you just put it, it'll show up in the message box, but you can also organize, like you can format it. So I'll do things like, so you could say put it after message box, put it and CR after message box, put result and CR after message box, so that you get all of your, so you put them both there, and you could see. and I've got something I was trying to trace, and I just had a line that I called like log or something, but it would just be, you would send the command and a bit of data, like the command, that the handler that happened and some data from it, and it would just be log handler data, and all that did was put command and data, and space data and CR after message block. So it just keeps adding it. So it was just a quick way rather than adding it to variables and saving the variables and putting them out. It was just a quick check. So as you're going along, because otherwise you got to stop your code and look at your variables. This way just outputs them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try that.
And the other thing I was thinking, Joan, is if you haven't already, you could put the results into a text field on that card, and then you can see side by side what you're sending and what you're receiving back.
Oh, that's true.
And look and see if you're getting the, I think it's a UID or UUID. I blank about which one the standard says, but getting the ID field back from the LRS. Which I mean, frankly, all I did was I set up the visualizer and I said, okay, show me what I'm sending. And then I was surprised when it actually came back and showed me what the LRS had responded with. I didn't plan on that to happen. It just sort of was part of the surprise of the implementation when I did that. So we're down under 3 minutes. So this is the point where I say, if we want to keep going, we have another Zoom meeting in the chat box, or if people want to wrap up for the day, I would be happy to have Joan sort of take over sharing and see what that response looks like. But if people need to get on with their day, I understand that as well. So let's just do the round robin. Kevin, do you have any feedback on the meeting, and you think we should come back with another session here?
Yeah, well, I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot. It's a great meeting, but I do have to run.
Okay.
So.
Hey, Martin,
But
you're
it was
next.
good. It was real good.
Yep.
I would just be interested just to see what comes out of, like what gets returned from Joan's thing. That's all. But other than that, I'd probably have to go right after that, because it's 5:30. So
yep, we're down under a minute. Joan, do you have a few minutes to experiment with us?
Yeah, I can do that for a few minutes.
Peter, how about you?
Okay.
I can do a few minutes more. Yeah.
Okay. Andrew, go ahead into the chat and grab that meeting link. Andrew, are you going to be able to come back with us?
I'm going to try. It might have to be from a mobile device, though.
Okay. Hope to see you. If not, see you next time.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
Go ahead and grab it out of the chat and log into the next one. That's not fun. Yeah, it is. Okay. Let's see if that'll work. I'm going there and starting. Okay, I got people in the waiting room. There we go. Martin, Joan. Thank you two for coming back.
You're welcome. And so
Peter's
I'm
coming
supposed
in.
to put.
John, I realize this is putting you in the hot seat, but it's also a chance to get some of the more advanced people looking over your shoulder and helping you with the live code. So hopefully you'll not feel put on the spot and be okay with this.
I'm doing it now, actually. So.
Looks like Andrew might be having a transition to his mobile device. He's not in yet. Speaking of which, I'm going to go to Slack and put the meeting in there. And Martin's put in the variable naming conventions in the chat.
Just a live code lesson. It also sort of explains a bit more about them.
All right. Guess I'll just share my screen and you can tell me what to type. Where's it? Here it is. Oh, it said the host disabled.
Oh, sorry. New meeting. I got to do that again. There you go. Should be available now. Should have started with that.
It's more just want to make sure not steering you wrong when you say it's returned, because
I was just trying to concatenate everything and throw it in the field. Probably a better
okay,
way to do it.
There, yeah.
That can be a challenge.
Why do that?
So one of the techniques when you're adding quotes is to highlight the word first, and then it'll put the quotes around the word rather than giving you two quotes. And I've fought this for months. I keep forgetting.
You could turn it right off. You could turn the automatic double quoting right off in the preferences somewhere.
Oh, there's something.
Oh, yeah. So that must be your code, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it didn't work before. Oh, there was no result. And then, so that must be it. And
That's your ID.
And it would be the ID of the statement? Is that what it's supposed to be?
Yeah, so if you go to your LRS, see if that matches, yeah.
And part of it returning that, I shouldn't say it, but part of the LRS returning that ID immediately is that you can then grab it and say, okay, I want to query the LRS and see what data was put in.
Okay.
If you don't have the whole block of data.
34A.
Yeah, where'd it go? LiveCode. There we go.
Yeah, looks like it. 34A.
Oops.
AFC2.
Yep, VF5.
14, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's
now we
good to
know.
Now we know. Yes, the curiosity kills the cat. Yeah, no, that's very cool. So that it's that easy to get to post it, and then you just get the statement right back, so that you can then follow it up with future things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Joan, what would you think about putting your stack in the GitHub for people to look at?
I'll clean it up. first.
Okay, but don't be embarrassed. It's a work in progress.
No, just
Yeah,
clean it
if
up so that people, like Andrew was saying, be consistent with the variable naming and that kind of thing, and
Yep.
make it easier for other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're comfortable doing that, feel free. If not, email it or put it in the Slack channel, and I can push it up there.
Yeah, I can clean it up.
Okay. No, I just meant I'm not sure how comfortable you are with GitHub. I still fight it each time I go in, but if you want to share it with me, I can publish it up there. So, Martin, the other thing that... Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
The other thing that I wanted to bring up is back to the agenda and talking about the intro to LiveCode. But before I do that, I should ask, any other questions or concerns, Joan, or about Joan's project before I change tracks on us?
I was going to say to Joan, when you rename your variables, be sure you rename all of them consistently. I do that. I start writing something. I should rename that to something different. And then what was working also stopped working because down the line, the old name is still in place. So consistent. You'll find, otherwise it won't work.
And the other thing I run into with that is if I start with a local variable and then suddenly decide it needs to be the card level, card script level, or stack script level, and I start renaming things, I have to, complete that renaming task before I get into other things I need to do to make sure I find all of them and get them renamed. Thanks, Peter. Good advice.
It's the worst thing. It's something that worked. You decide to make it better, and it stops working. It's because very often you're inconsistent in your naming.
Yeah, well done, Joe. Too.
If you do, when you're doing finding within a tab, you can have find and replace.
Find and replace.
Yeah, so you can search through the tab and then try and make sure you. But then the problem is if you had, your variable was water, then you changed it to tea water, and you do find and replace. You have to make sure you stop when you're done the first round, because if you don't, then you go through again, and now you've got TT water, because every water gets replaced. So it's, think, okay, this will solve it, but no. There's a strict variable naming setting that you can have, and that makes you declare variables every time. So you have to say local within each handler. And what that does is, if you type a variable in that's not declared, it won't let you do it. And it's a way to make sure that your variables are always the right name. But it's a lot of, it's sort of anti what LiveCode is. LiveCode is just pick a variable, name it, do it, don't declare things. You don't have to say whether it's a script or a number or whatever. So, but some people do use that strict naming settings, but I don't. Okay.
I appreciate that.
And what was the question? There was a question
in the chat. She's just saying her internet connection's unstable, so she turned off video and audio.
Okay. You, Brian, and you were just saying something about, I had a meeting all day, and I read briefly your email about introduction to LiveCode something. So you were just saying something about that, and then
that is, I wanted to get back to that while you were online. I think I'm sharing here. So not to go back to too much of it, but ideally what I'd like to do is get you, me, and Andrew. I don't know, I meant to ask Peter, is this something you would be willing to participate in and present some content?
One thing you did mention somewhere was about video callbacks.
Okay.
because I've done some work with that
Oh, you have? Okay.
to talk about that. Yeah.
I mean, ideally we'd all be online to present and ask questions, but if you wanted to like video yourself and we could just show a video that you've prepared and then answer questions around it, that's an option too. Here it is. So I'll put Peter on there. That would be helpful. So this is Martin, just to talk you through this a little bit. I talked through it with the rest of the group before you came on.
Okay.
So I'm not trying to single you out. I just want to make sure you're aware and involved. We've sort of talked through most of these topics early on. So looking at the user interaction elements, button fields, scroll bar, video object. We had comments that the mouse up is the default handler for buttons. And the other value of using mouse up is the user can cancel while the mouse is down by moving the mouse outside the item, and then they're not sending the mouse up.
Yeah.
We talked through viewing the PDF in the browser widget. I think I did that before you came on as well.
Yeah.
I showed an update to the project I'm working on, and I've got some examples of some of the functionality there. But we can sort of get into that. This is my other screen, just to jump in and sort of show you. You know, after your feedback on the other one, I sort of updated the other one with these other tools. But basically, I realized today I'm using a single instance of the browser widget, and this tab panel is setting the URL each time.
Yeah.
So we sort of walk through the trade-offs with that, meaning each time I set the URL, I am refreshing that browser with a new page, but I'm also losing any cached data. So, and this is the example we were talking through. If I go to this first page with the visualizer, it says not submitted yet. And if I submit a value, I get a JavaScript confirmation, and this is where the ID comes back. Well, now I've got data in this JavaScript visualizer, and I can scroll down and look through it. But if I click on any of these tabs, I'm sending a new URL to the browser widget, so all this data that's been submitted will be flushed out of memory.
Okay.
It's still out there in the LRS. It's not truly lost, but it's flushed out of memory. So the concern there is maybe I want to change the interface, put a browser widget that is named, you know, independently, so each of these items that are on the tab browser is then calling a different widget rather than calling the same one and refreshing the user ID, so, or the URL. So part of it was just going through that functionality and talking through that. And again, I have added the prefs as we had before. I'm just changing the not the location, but the height and the width of the widget, and revealing this information that's behind it. So I talked through the programming limitations of that. Is on these other ones, I need to refresh the size of that browser widget. And if I was hiding and showing this and showing something else for any of these other tabs, I would literally have to be hiding those objects, hiding the fields, hiding the graphic that is here as looking like a form.
Yeah.
So in this case, I'm just hiding and showing it. And then the other thing I did live was to add in these two buttons, and I built URLs by dragging the example files that Helen put together onto the server, building URLs for that, and then copying that URL into a button. So again, I'm using the same approach. I'm setting the URL of the same browser widget, but I'm able to display the PDF. I'm able to display a video. The video doesn't expand beyond, I think it's probably 100% the size of the video. But one of the things we talked about is, I think earlier when I was doing some searching on video profiles, I found, let me pause this before it starts talking over me. I found a web page for the video profile, and I think some of the examples they had up there were HTML files where it's calling a video and having JavaScript embedded that can let us track and interact with it a little more.
Okay.
So I want to update these examples so they're using HTML to present the information. But part of this was just showing the PDF, showing the video like we've done before.
Yeah. Okay.
So
That's cool.
Yep, that's just sort of the update I gave earlier.
Yeah.
But the idea was we wanted to go through and review, and we did this with the rest of the group. We're talking about showing the video in the PDF in the browser widget, just like I showed you. Andrew has an example of the browser widget text list. I need to copy that into GitHub. I did find it on the Slack channel, but I need to publish that into GitHub for the team. And then, I mentioned this already, talking about the JavaScript in the web page for the PDF, or JavaScript in the web page on the video profile. And then we also talked about having a lesson in JavaScript for working with the browser widget. It sounds like both Peter and Andrew haven't worked with that too much, so that might be on me and you. I don't know if you've got much experience with it.
Not me. Not for JavaScript, no.
Okay.
Like I don't know that much JavaScript, so I can't really. I just sort of read through it and can kind of figure out stuff, but not to write it myself.
I'm not much more advanced than you, but I've got some working examples, so I'll go ahead and put my name next to that. And then we talked through the idea of using the libURL versus tsnet. Joan, before she started her demo, that you saw some of it, before she started, she talked about trying to use the code from tsnet and getting warnings that was only in the commercial version, and she didn't have the upgrade. So Andrew sort of jumped in and spoke a bit about the libURL. And what
that's when I joined in. That's
Okay,
when I
so
joined
you
in,
did
when
see
he was
that.
talking the difference. Yeah.
And then
So
she's also asked about saving the queued statements, saving as a file, and I think Andrew gave her tips on using the file.
Yeah.
Tab delimited.
Yeah. The challenge for that will just be how to save a JSON file. Whether it's just each statement is there as a separate line, and you just do line by line. You send the statements and then you delete them from the file, or just whatever you use. I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure. That again, I don't know how.
Yep.
Because JSON has returns in it.
That's sort of the end of what I wanted to
that
talk.
answers. Yeah, that answered a question I had. Joan's example.
Yeah.
Was that in the JavaScript that Devlin Peck, he had there's a JavaScript stringify statement, and I thought, do we have to change this some JSON data? But it appears he just used straight JSON data, which has returns and has whatever in it, and the LRS just took it, so it didn't need it in just one flat line of JSON. So, anyways, so you've caught me up on that.
Else where she had cleaned it or not, but
I've
seen it sort of both ways, and obviously it works until you run into errors.
Yeah. Okay.
So the rest of this is just the meeting notice, but the reason I wanted to go through this is I don't know if you think we should have separate meetings and talk through what we want to present, or if we should just sort of prepare on our own and see if we could come up with timing, either part of the meeting next Wednesday, or I could set up another when to meet that lets people identify when they're available. I don't think the audience is really our full team, but it's one of those things where I was thinking if we could get people who are experienced with LiveCode as presenters, then it is sort of our full team that we need to have both halves there.
Yeah, and this is, like probably, like for me, there's a couple weeks that I've got, like this next week on Tuesday or Wednesday, I can't make the whole meeting. I've got a work meeting up until like 4:30 again. And then next week is that way again. So it's not until like the 7th of April that I'm available for the whole thing on Wednesday.
Yeah.
So there could be a Friday or something that I could do something. So if you set up whatever the when to meet or something, then I could join in with that, and that could be a specific session on LiveCode. And maybe as you're coming up with some topics for what people want to learn, or you could, as people have been learning, they could say what they want to have included with that. Right, like if Joan or other people.
I'm getting the feeling that we've done what we could as we went, but I think it would be helpful to have like an overview session, and it's sounding to me like your schedule may make it better if you could like record something when you have the time.
Sure. Yeah, no, that would be fine. I thought about doing that for today.
Independently, we could do that.
No, I thought of the thing I'm working on. I thought I'm not going to get it, or not going to even well, I didn't get it done, but I was thinking of just recording my session, like my explanation of what I did, and then sending the file and the recording, and then people can watch that. And there's enough people around there that know LiveCode that could play around with it. And
part of what I was hoping to do today was that update, and where if you've made changes and what you've changed, but time's a challenge.
Yeah. Oh, the other thing, this is just for a future meeting, is one, they have the xAPI party date to reserve and decide if we want to make a submission.
Yeah.
Right. And we're also going to make a figure out what our project would be for our the API cohort. And then do we want to make a request to make a submission for that? But that could be for a future, has to be for a future meeting. We all have to go. So we've gone to 6 now, so I should.
I'll just capture these.
Yeah.
My spelling is horrible. I mean, it's still saying there's something wrong.
No, it's a blue means, okay, that was wrong and I fixed it. Oh, no, it's wrong. Presentation. Presentation. No, it's right. It's right. Underlined blue means I fixed it for you.
Oh, okay, good. So, Peter, any thoughts or comments?
No. So next week I'm more flexible.
Okay.
So whatever.
Okay. So I should get going. I'm sure you guys do too.
Yep.
All right then. Thanks for joining. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon.
See you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Brian.
Yep. Oh yeah, Joan signed off. Okay.